Okay, we're in chapter 8, and we're about verse 46, 47, somewhere along there. Okay, remember this woman had a female bleeding, hemorrhaging. That made her completely untouchable by anyone.
Leper.
What?
She might as well have been a leper.
Yes, they were in the same category in the law, and she was embarrassed, humiliated, and ostracized. That's the reason that she came up behind him. She did not. She would be. She didn't want to make a public spectacle of herself, and she touched his garment. Actually, I believe I used the word tassel, didn't I?
Yes.
And that, because that's technically what she touched, was the fringe or tassel at the skirt end, the open skirt end. This would be his outer garment. Typically, a Jewish male of that time would wear some kind of underpants, usually short, kind of like boxer shorts. Then he would wear I don't mean to feminize Jesus, but kind of like a chemise, a garment that touched him at the shoulders and was rather light. Now, the reason they did that was the heat. And you think, well, why would they wear? Have you ever seen a Bedouin Arab in full regalia in the Sahara Desert? They wear at least 3 layers of clothes. And they're all open at the top, so that as he moves, the air is pumped up and out, and it's actually cooler to do it that way. Now, I'm just going into that detail because I like to put you right there. Just
One thing I wondered is if, as they walked along, of course, that hem would get tattered, and maybe they kind of just wove them, the strings into little tassels because of that.
no,
It was on purpose.
on purpose, because the Deuteronomy 6, the fringes of your garments, and the Jews took it not exactly literally, but symbolically. They had the phylactery on the head. They had a thing over the heart, in your head, in your heart, and
On your hand.
on your hand.
Wrist, I should say.
Yes, so they had a wrist. But now, whether Jesus did that or not, we don't know, because it was.
What it meant.
The reason we don't know, none of the gospel writers tell us. And so what they don't tell us about Jesus, we don't know about Jesus. I cannot overemphasize that principle. People are always making plausible explanations. But plausibility with respect to Jesus is a no-no. Believers are bad about doing that. So just, God knew how much He wanted us to know. And if God is satisfied with it, I don't care how frustrated you are about not knowing it, you might as well be satisfied with it, because that's all you're going to get.
Did you see that History Channel presentation of, they sort of took what they called a shroud, and that imprint that was on that shroud, and kind of came up with some kind of computer-generated idea of what he looked like? I mean,
Yes.
we're fascinated by that
Okay,
stuff.
I'm not going to go there, Jesse.
Again, but it's just the fascination of it, you know.
There's fads in shroud studies
Yes.
just like there's fads in all historical studies. And the fad is now to tend to accept it as being first century. I have serious doubts that the cloth is older than the 11th or 12th century AD. Now, am I an expert? No way. But I have studied it intensely, including articles in the Scientific American about it, and the Biblical Archaeology Review, which are both good sources for factual knowledge about things. Okay. Someone did, now, Peter, in his own way, said, Lord, the crowd is pressing. In other words, how can you ask who touched you when there's at least 2 or 3 dozen people touching you all the time? And Jesus, and now this is my translation, because it is the way we would say it today, as from the Greek. Someone intentionally touched me. It wasn't an accidental touch. And that's what the language necessarily implies. That is, somebody with intent touched me because I felt power going out of me. Now, as I remember, that's exactly where we were when I was about a minute into Alicia's time last week. That is, we were talking about that and emphasizing it. Sometimes we conservative believers, which I count myself that, I mean, I believe the text is true in all circumstances. We think of almost of Jesus healing by magic. That he just, he was the Son of God, but that's not what happened. He used energy to heal people. Now, the closest thing I can come from my own experience is the energy that it takes to relate to different people. Mana will tell you that when I preached regularly, both Sunday morning and Sunday night, she had to get me home in about an hour, because after relating in preaching and then relating in the socialization after the service, I had about an hour before I just melted into the floor. So she would make sure to get me home.
Sure. You used the illustration one time of it'd be like throwing a match into a cold mountain lake, would be how much it was felt by God, or how much power he used, but yet it was still felt. He felt that.
Yes.
No matter how little a deal it was, he felt it.
Well, I was talking there about sin. The reason God can take sin into his person is that he is so good that it doesn't raise his temperature.
Right.
That's maybe a kind of rough-hewn metaphor, but think about an alpine lake. I think of lake in Rocky Mountain National Park I went swimming in. And it was
it glacier? Was it
Glacier, not Rocky Mountain, Glacier National Park. And it was the hottest summer they had had up until that time. And I went into the lake, and it was 53 degrees, and I didn't raise the temperature of the lake at all. I didn't stay in it long enough. So that, getting back to, that's a little bit off the subject, but it's still in the idea of that Jesus paid a price personally, physically, for his healing. It was no free lunch. When the woman realized that she, and somebody pointed this out, I needed to put she in twice, I'm pretty sure I did on the next edit. realized that she could not remain anonymous any longer. She came trembling and fell down before him. She publicly told why she had touched him and how she had been healed instantly. That's one of the aspects of Jesus' healing. With one exception, he healed instantaneously. Can you remember an occasion when that wasn't true? Now, we're trying to see if you really know the scriptures, you know, like.
Was it the blind man who couldn't, his vision wasn't perfect the first time through, or?
Yes. Jesus healed his sight, and Jesus asked him, and he said, I see people as trees walking. Now, that doesn't mean with a leafy top on them and trunk and things like that. That's as close as he could come. He had never seen a person walking. And so that's a metaphor. He saw him like a tree, which was the solid big object moving around. And Jesus then spoke, and what you may not know is that people who are born blind have to learn to see. Not only their optic nerves and retinas and all that physical thing have to be healed, the brain has to be trained. And that's what's going on in that event, Lindia. Jesus healed his physical sight, and then he healed his brain. He adjusted the perception, because you see and you feel and you taste and you smell with your brain. And if your brain is not right, it doesn't make a difference how much light you process. And that it wasn't, I didn't even know about that until in the late 1930s, 1940s, in Houston, there was a case of a man that had been born blind. And the article in the local paper pointed out that he had to be trained to know what he was seeing. So, see, Jesus didn't, in one sense, violate the laws of physics. He never did violate them. He used them for his behalf. Quick.
Could it be said that Adam and Eve had to go through the same process?
I'm not going to go there. It could be that the idea of naming the creatures was that process. I don't know. It's interesting to speculate as long as you don't put much weight on it.
Yeah.
Okay. She publicly told why she had touched him and how she had been healed instantly. Daughter. Now, this literally in Greek, this is woman, guner. But that is difficult for modern readers to not take as a kind of rebuke or harshness. When his mother Mary asked him to turn the water into wine, he says, woman. But I translated that lady, because it's the equivalent of lady. Here, since this is a daughter of Abraham, that's the reason I translated it daughter. I want to get the emotional equivalent into it. And if I were to say woman, that sounds, it's almost impossible for us not to think of it as pretty harsh, pretty abrupt. And he was anything but that. There is not any really good You couldn't say female friend, although that would be, but that has other connotations. So daughter is the best I could do. If you can think of anything better, let me know. Okay. Your faith has made you well. Notice the perfect tense. She already was well. See, your faith has already made you well. And depart in peace. This word peace is used many different ways in the New Testament. Basically, though, it means to be in harmony with God. Now, that ought to produce peace in the sense of peace of mind. The peace, remember the series that Max preached on Don't Be Anxious in Anything. He said, the peace of God will do something for you. That means he has just said the Lord is near. And so you, a believer, is in harmony with God. Isn't that a beautiful idea? It's a powerful idea. I used it from my own scientific background. I get Faraday's use of iron filings to make visible the magnetic lines of force on a magnet. And I think of getting in harmony with God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as lining up along those lines of spiritual force. And that's what it means to be at peace with God. I'm not fighting against the spiritual force of God. I'm lining up with it so that I'm in harmony with it. And that is extremely powerful, because we then partake of the energy, the power of God. That's one of the things that's behind some of the things that Randy said this morning. You know, I'm going to confess that I have never been able to really memorize without some severe application, and it won't stick with me. It just doesn't do that. But the ideas of the Scripture is what come to mind. That's what comes to mind here. And of the two, I'll settle for the idea. I wish I could get the actual words, but it won't stay in there. So God, that's one of the humbling things that God gives me to keep me from thinking more highly of myself than I ought to. And
I used to marvel at men that could just quote Bible scriptures and they had it there, and I said, I can't do that.
So,
Yeah.
I don't want to discourage any of you from trying.
No.
You hear that? While he was still speaking. Now, actually, my memory is we got to just this point, and I was discussing. See, we've lapped over. We just had our roof repaired, redone after the hailstorm, and they lapped over, you know. And like a roof, I lap over it to make sure there's a seamless idea going on there. The idea that I wanted you to get out of this, and I think that Luke wants you to get out of this, is how busy Jesus was. There was more calls on his time than one person could do. And there were times when he had to call time out and go to a quiet place and regenerate himself in connection with the Father, calling on power from his Father, who graciously granted it to him.
We better do the same thing.
Yeah,
We're not
yeah. someone from the synagogue president's house came and informed him, "Your daughter has died. Stop troubling the teacher." Now, remember, the president of the synagogue had entreated him, begged him to go with him to his house because his daughter was dying or at the point of death. But just as this woman was departing in peace, somebody from his home came and said, it's too late. Your daughter has died. Stop troubling. And this is one of the things that caused me to make a translation of the New Testament, because you can get this from the tenses of the Greek verbs. Your daughter has died. Point action. That's aorist tense. Stop troubling. See, the servant was saying that what the man was doing was troubling Jesus. Jesus might have had a different idea about that.
No bother.
No bother. He effectively says that. But that's what he said. And those little nuances, I remember first year Greek in 1951, or 1950, really, when I started Greek, how enthralled I was by those little nuances that Greek can do just with the tense of the verb, the kind of action. So stop troubling the teacher. But when Jesus heard this, he says, stop being afraid. Now notice there, immediately the father was afraid. Now, we might say, stop grieving, but it's expressed here in terms of fear. There's nothing more fearful than the death of a loved one, especially the death of a child. It is a devastating experience, and one that most parents will never completely recover from. And thank goodness we've never had to do that. And it's almost, if not as devastating, if a child is born stillborn. And that's something that many people just can't. This is a free sermon, what I'm going to do right now. Never tell a mother who has given birth to a dead baby, well, after all, you can have others. Jesus doesn't want you to say things like that. That says, well, babies are just interchangeable. I'm sure people that do that have not thought through that, but that's the equivalent. That's what the mother cannot help but hear. So don't do it. Just don't do it. That's the free sermon. Okay. Stop being afraid. Just have faith, and she will be made whole. Again, notice the sequence of tense. Stop being afraid. Just have faith. Could have just said, keep having faith. The idea is faith is an ongoing state. And it does not necessarily mean that you'll get what you want. Faith is a relationship with Jesus that describes our trust in Him to do what's best. In this case, it does mean that she will live again. But it doesn't always mean that. You can pray in faith whether you get what you pray for or not. Because faith is your relationship to Christ. it's trusting him.
Isn't it, I like what you said of keep having faith, because he came in faith to Jesus. Now, with his faith stopped, that his daughter had died. And he says, no, keep having it.
Yes, that's the language is there. She will be made well. Now this is what is said. Doesn't say she will return to life, but made well. She will be healed, in other words. And since her presenting symptom was death, necessarily implies life. When he arrived at the home, he allowed no one but Peter, John, and James, and the girl's parents to enter with him. Now, I think that to enter with him means into the room where the girl was lying. I'm not sure of that. It could mean just he didn't allow anyone else in the house. There are commentators that think that. Everyone else was wailing loudly and beating on their chests. Now, if you've never seen somebody in the Middle East mourning, you haven't seen anybody mourning. They mourn out loud, they wail, I've seen videos, pictures of them, and they go, I can't even do it when my partial plate falls down on my tongue. But that's what they do. And they do beat on their chest. In fact, some of them carry it to the extreme of injuring themselves. They actually will beat themselves with chains and whips. And it doesn't say anything about tearing garments here, but they did. As I always like to point out, do you see that little place there? You know why that's in men's suits? Most people think it's just to make the lapel lie down, but that's not so. That is a sign of mourning for Prince, what was Queen Victoria's, Prince Albert. That's a sign of mourning for Prince Albert. She decreed, Queen Victoria decreed a full year of mourning, and that meant you had to have a cut in your lapel. So the Savile Row tailors were up to it. They just started putting a V-shaped place, and that's it. It's amazing. See, we still are mourning. So it wasn't just a year, it was 153 years of mourning been going on. And I don't see any that is going to stop soon.
It's a style.
Yeah. Okay. Stop wailing. Stop doing that loo sound. She is not dead. She is just sleeping. Now, this language is ambiguous, and we can't go behind it. Actually, Jesus had used sleep as a synonym for death, which was very common in the culture. So it could be, though, that she was just in a coma. Again, this is one of those things you have to be satisfied with the ambiguity. Now, you can argue that it just means she was in a coma, but you know what? Nobody is bound to believe you. Now, you think about it. So, I just take it as it's written. If you want to think she was dead, which I tend to think so, but I'm far from being able to prove it up. They all laughed scornfully. Now, I know that is the equivalent of what the Greek says. I toyed with the idea of saying derisively, but that seemed a little strong. So I just put scornfully. In other words, how can you say that? We know she's dead. That's what I'm trying to get over here. They laughed him to scorn would be another way to put it. Again, I want to get over the idea of how difficult it was for the people around Jesus to have any conception of his power and authority. It is still difficult, even for believers. Sometimes in some areas, especially for believers. And we wouldn't laugh in his face. We'd be horrified with that, but sometimes we practically do an equivalent thing. So remember, if Jesus says he can do it, he can do it.
Ain't no doubt.
And he can do it, but he may not do it when I want him to. See, God will bring healing to all believers. That's a promise from Isaiah. But it takes a miracle for him to do it in this age. But in the age to come, every believer will have every disease, every weakness of the flesh. In fact, every believer will have a body as powerful and as healthy as Jesus' resurrection body. And the older I get and the more decrepit my body becomes, that becomes a really powerful incentive to hang on. I think any of you have had enough physical problems, no matter what age you are, that promise is very precious. Okay. They all laughed scornfully and began to ridicule him because they were certain that she was dead. He took her by the hand and says, "Child, get up." Literally it says, "Little girl, rise." Talitha Kumi in Aramaic. And some translations translated Aramaic. But if you don't know Greek, I'm pretty sure you don't know Aramaic. So I don't know Aramaic except in the few phrases that is used in the New Testament. And this is one. Little girl. Notice again the compassionate language of Jesus. He had just been laughed at scornfully, but he didn't let that make him feel any different. Now there's our goal, folks. Now, most of us, we will find it extremely difficult to turn immediately from scorn to just going about our own business. But that's the goal. That's the pattern Jesus leaves us. If somebody scorns us, we don't let it deviate us from whatever it is that God wants us to do. Jesse?
That brings to mind then, the people that were wailing all of a sudden went to scorning and laughing. I'm wondering how, to use a term, sincere their wailing was.
No, it was because it was sincere. See that, Jesse?
Okay.
See, because they knew, they were certain that she was dead. And that's the reason they were wailing.
So they went to the other extreme. You might say.
No, it is a natural flow of ideas.
I would
see-
have thought like the parents, for instance, wouldn't necessarily scorn him. They would be hopeful.
Yeah, but, well, we don't know what they were.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, here is the thing. when it says laughed, that does not mean rejoice. It means they acted scornfully. I think I understand that the word laugh to scorn or laugh scornfully, it's, maybe I should say chuckled scornfully or something like that. They, oh, what do you mean? See, that kind of attitude. Maybe laughter is one that led you that.
Would that be like making fun of him?
Yes. But see, any phrase that I know of in English has that idea of making fun of. Well, it's not fun in the sense, it means to set him at naught. And we do it with a wicked laugh. If you think of it as wicked, maybe you'll get the right idea. Ridiculed him. I thought about that, and it would have been a legitimate way to do it. Her spirit returned to her, and she got up. Now, this is the phrase that makes me pretty sure that she was dead, because the idea of the spirit returning to the body is almost a definition of resurrection. You remember that Peter, in 1 Peter, talks about a time when Christ, Jesus, was dead in the body, but alive in the spirit. He went and preached to the people imprisoned at the time of Noah. And we're not going to go there. I could spend a whole class on that.
Let's do it next week.
No, we're just not going to go there. If we ever study Peter, First Peter. Okay, Lindia?
Okay, Charles, expound a little bit to help my understanding. Jesus said she was not dead, that she was sleeping. So is there a special meaning in what Jesus was saying as far as her sleep is concerned? Because now her spirit has returned. Is the spirit just her consciousness?
Well,
or?
Linda, that's the reason I'm not absolutely sure, because it can just mean that. But the most common use of the idea of the spirit returning to a body is the spirit returning and coming back from the dead. Now that's the reason. Notice I'm being a little careful there, because I don't want to make the text mean more than it has to. This is a very tempting thing to do. Preachers are some of the worst people at doing it. They want to emphasize their point, and they make a text more sure than the text itself is. And that is disrespectful to the Word. They think it's being respectful to God, but you cannot be respectful to God and be disrespectful to His Word. Let's just go on, Jesse. Okay. Her spirit returned to her, and she got up. Then he gave orders that she be given something to eat. Why do you think he wanted her to have something to eat?
To prove to them that she was alive.
What?
To prove that she was alive.
Okay, that's a very distinct possibility. There's also another possibility, and that is that the experience of dying and coming to life takes energy out of you. And notice we've already seen that energy leaves Jesus. And so perhaps that either one, or preferably I think both of those ideas are what Luke intends for us to do. You remember in the first one that you shared with us to prove that she was alive, That's what Jesus did at the Sea of Galilee. He asked, "What are you having for breakfast?" And he deliberately ate smoked fish and bread. And that demonstrated that he wasn't a spirit. And notice the word spirit has just been here. So that may be you may be exactly right. Okay. His parents were beside themselves in astonishment. Literally, the word beside themselves means outside of themselves. Ecstatic, from ecstasis in Latin, meaning that's what ecstasy means. We don't really think, but see, you can be so full of joy and astonishment that you literally are outside of your regular state of consciousness.
So like you lose self-control, or?
No, it's not self. It is just you are so joyous that it changes the way you think and act. This is what the word ecstasy means. And there are some things in our lives that bring us ecstasy. It changes the total way we're behaving and thinking. And I remember the first time I held our son, and I was ecstatic in that sense. I was changed, and I haven't changed back. He spent most of last week with us. And we just really enjoyed having him there. Always I've enjoyed, he's got a mind that is very tough and sinewy. First time I ever shared that insight with him, made him unhappy because he thought I was being critical. But I had to explain to him that's the same kind of mind that I think Abraham Lincoln had. In other words, when he gets a hold of something, he's got it. I mean, it becomes a living thing with him, and that's a good thing. Now, notice he instructed them not to tell anyone what had happened. You remember, it's only non-Jews. Remember the Gerasene demoniac that we just got through? It's only non-Jews that Jesus said, go tell the story. Because he knew that whatever was spoken, it would be misunderstood and misinterpreted. And just keep that in mind. Chapter 9. Now, we're going to start something in chapter 9. People that analyze and the structure of Gospels see the principle here in chapter 9, verse 51, where it says he set his face resolutely toward Jerusalem. And the whole rest of the Gospel of Luke until the last week in his life, he is on that journey. So the sending out of the 12 was part of the preparation. You remember that when, say, the President of the United States is going to visit someplace, he sends out a preparatory group. Then they prepare the way. This is kind of a special case of John the Baptist, who came to prepare the way for the king. But this, notice, that was to prepare for Jesus' public ministry. Now this is to prepare for his final coronation on a cross. And that's what they were doing. They were to prepare the towns and villages for the one who was coming after them. He called the 12 together and gave them authority and power over all the demons and to heal illnesses. Do you see any significance in those two things he empowered them to do?
Physical and spiritual.
What?
Physical and spiritual.
Yes, that aspect is there. I think it is can be a little more specific than that. What kind of actions, or what was the, well, I don't know how to ask a question without giving the answer away. I'll just go ahead and do that, okay, with your permission. These are kingdom activities. They're signs that the Messianic King is coming. These are the works that the prophets of old attributed to the Messianic King. Power over Satan and power over disease. And so people who read this in the first century would immediately get that. Now, since Luke is writing to Gentiles, they would get it only because they had been taught that. The Jews, on the other hand, the overwhelming majority of them didn't need to be told that, because all of their religious teachers in the intertestamental period taught that that was what the Messiah would do. He would come to defeat Satan and come to defeat disease.
It's interesting that the words power and authority are used.
Yes.
Because power is like the ability, and authority is the right. It's sort of like I have a license to carry, so I've got the power to do something. But I don't have the authority. I don't have the right to do certain things. And with these two elements, you've got the right to do it and you've got the ability to do it. And oftentimes we as Christians don't understand that God has the authority, like to talk about healing. You know, He has the authority to do what He wants to do with our healing, whether it does it now or in the future to come.
Yes. I'm going to have to do a little modification on that. I would have to look at my Greek text to know whether both words are here or not. I'm not sure they are. I think they are. And so your analysis would be completely correct. Whether or not there's two words here or not, both ideas are implied. That see, you can have authority to do something, but not the ability. And so they had both the authority from Christ and the power from God to do it. And that's I'm sure what Luke is meaning here. And thank you for your sharing. Okay. Then he sent them to preach about the kingdom of God. Now notice, this is almost redundant, because the idea of having authority over Satan's works and over illness is about the kingdom. Because kingdom is not a thing, it's the rule of God. It's when God's rule is being done on earth as it is in heaven. And that's what's here. And to heal the sick. This, see, Luke, in this 2 verses, says it 2 different ways. but he wants to nail it down. So that's what we need to get out of it, is this was the kingdom. The king sent his messengers to do the work of the rule of God ahead of himself. And then he came along and gave approval and even more, exercised more power and authority. Okay. Take nothing with you to help you on the way. Now, later on, he's going to say, take things. But why not take anything to help you on the way? What's different about this?
She wanted them to rely on God.
Well, I think it's more practical than that, JT.
Well,
But
then it would, well, if the practicality of it would be like travel and being in contact, gives you the opportunity to become in contact with people.
I think it's more than that. Okay?
All right, I'm not getting it.
Yeah, okay. That's, I was going to give it to you. Urgency. Urgency. After, when he begins to equip his followers for the long haul after the period after his resurrection, he has them make elaborate preparation. But this is urgent. He's going to go within a few short weeks to his death on the cross. And whatever is going to be done needs to be done yesterday. I'm sure that that's the thing that Luke wants us to get here.
Is there any difference between this and the 70 that was sent out later?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Is the,
Okay, that's what I'm
yeah.
want to clarify.
Yes. This is because effectively all the time they have to bring Jews back to faithfulness in the covenant is between the time he sent them out and the time they conspired to have him executed on a cross. And I'm not engaging in numbers, right? But actually it was about 120 people. See? Urgency. I want you to see that all of these things, there's no esoteric meanings or anything. It is just the time is short. The time is near. And that's the way to think about it. Okay, Mike, mark that down. It's verse 3 where we start next week.